Joining us now with an exclusive update is Robert Scott Bell.
Thanks again, Michael. Great to be back with the Savage Nation, and a message of health, freedom, and liberty here that gets out like nowhere else in media. Thank you so very much. You know, sound bites are sound information. You know, when people are listening through the mainstream media, all they get are sound bites. You can't have philosophical discussions. You can't delve into the depths of what needs to be understood like you do so well on the Savage Nation. And much of what's reported, in fact, in the mainstream media is packaged like a Flintstone vitamin. It's colorful, it's slick, and it has promises of legitimacy, but the reality is it's devoid of nutrients that the body can use, and it has a whole heap of other things, toxic colorings, pesticides added, who knows, that the body doesn't need. And this week, big news out of believe it or not, the mainstream media actually covered a story on nutrition, and they covered it right. Big news on ADHD, the attention deficit hyperactivity disorder that has no blood biomarkers. Nobody knows how to really diagnose it. They just say, we know it when we see it, which is why that film Generation RX is so phenomenal by Kevin Miller. Talks about the medicating of all children based on, non-specific biomarkers or no biomarkers whatsoever. And as I said, this week in the news, there was a big study that came out that said, in fact, that pesticides were a cause of ADHD. In fact, it was causing double the amount of attention deficit diagnoses that they're linking now back to pesticide use. That's right. This headline reads, pesticide linked to ADHD in children. And according to the study, this is children exposed to higher levels of pesticides found on commercially grown fruits and vegetables in the United States were more likely to have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And this research published last Monday, and it's following up on researchers in the U.S. and Canada, and data from almost 1,200 children between 8 and 15 found that the higher residues of pesticides in their system, known as the organophosphates, were roughly twice as likely to have this behavioral disorder present in their life. And, of course, we know, Michael, you know so well, that these synthetics have no place in the natural world, so that our enzymes have no ability to interact and modify or alter them for easy excretion. Right? We have metabolic waste, right? We know what to do when we break down food as it's been grown on planet Earth since there's been a planet. The body knows how to break down complex proteins, fats, carbohydrates, all of these things. And there are enzymes to break them down. Eventually they're utilized, they're released as energy, and then the wastes are then excreted via the urine, obviously, or via the colon. This is normal stuff. But somehow modern man in his arrogance doesn't consider the fact that, especially in children, these synthetic toxins are not being altered in a way that the body can efficiently and effectively deal with it. And so we're seeing increases in oxidative stress, damage to the cells, damage to the metabolism, damage to the DNA because of the depletion of nutrients in order that are being used basically to defend against these toxic poisons.
True.
And they're acknowledging, Michael, that the vast majority of pesticide exposure for these children coming in through, not necessarily airborne, not necessarily waterborne, but here's your moment of duh, from food grown this way. And these residues are not necessarily things that you can wash off because they're coming in through the soils. And when we understand the law of the terrain, which we've covered here, and you know so well from your studies of botany and how that relates in the natural medicines on planet Earth, if you alter the nutrient content of the soil, if you destroy the earthworms that will break down that soil and allow for the bioavailability of the nutrients, the vital trace minerals, trace elements, especially and including, of course, selenium, which we've covered here as well, then, of course, those things are not going to be in the plants. Now, if the plants need nutrients, just like humans and animals, to be healthy and viable, to grow and stay well, if they're not available in the soil, Michael, where are the plants going to get it from? And, of course, if we think about the modern agriculture, big agribusiness, they put their whole lot into what were the munitions of World War II, these phosphorus, phosphates, and all of these things, the nitrogens that used to be made for bombs. Now they said, well, World War II is over. Let's sell it to the farmers. We need a new market. And, of course, the farmers went on and they said, wow, the massive growth, high nitrogen stuff, it's happening. Of course, it grew imbalanced plants, life forms that were not in balance from a nutrient perspective, because man is so arrogant to believe that he can do as well or better than the Creator, than creation itself. Yeah, we throw a couple of those nutrients, 2 or 3, and we think that's comprehensive. It's kind of like dunderheaded scientists who say that salt is sodium chloride. And you're thinking, sodium chloride, isn't that salt? Well, yes, sort of. But where on planet Earth, Michael, can if you mine for salt, you pull it out of the sea or the evaporated seabeds, where do you find salt as sodium and chloride and nothing else? It doesn't come out of the planet. That's not the way it happens. The healthiest salts, of course, contain as many as 70 to 84 trace minerals in conjunction with the sodium and chloride.
Exactly.
Yet these scientists have such blinders on that they think you can refine all of the elements out, leave the sodium and chloride, and it's just the same. Just as if you put nitrogen fertilizers, nitrogen pellets, and you think that's going to duplicate what is normally available through soils that have all the array of minerals because it has been undisturbed by toxic synthetics that destroy the microbes that make the plants, or let's say make the nutrients available for the plants. I mean, this isn't rocket science. I could talk to 4th graders about this. They'll get it. And now, of course, the study's coming out and say, hey, maybe we should rethink these pesticides. And then we've got even more in the realm of genetically modified organisms. My friend Jeffrey Smith, he wrote Seeds of Deception, talking about the move to genetically modify all life, alter it so it can even take more pesticides, like the Roundup-ready crops you've heard about. And in fact, they said it would cause the ability, or let's say to reduce pesticide use when they entered these genetically modified organisms into food, into corn, into these things. Turns out they're basically doubling the amount of pesticides needed and creating the scenario where, as we know, the depletion of the key minerals, including selenium, will result in cancers, result in behavioral disorders, and on and on and on. When will government get it? Of course, they're bought off by big agribusiness, just as we've talked about big pharma, so there's not a level playing field, a free market for Americans to say, hey, look, I don't want genetically modified organisms in my food. And are you allowed to label GM-free? Or I would like organic food. Are you allowed to even say that it's better, or will you be sued under food disparagement laws for upsetting a piece of broccoli that's been grown with pesticides?
Crazy.